By 2024, the US has over 340 million people, making it the third most populous country in the world. But if you look at the population map, you'll see the distribution is really uneven. There are places packed with people like New York and California, but also places that are huge and almost empty. And North Dakota is a typical example. The population density there is less than 5 people per square kilometer, which means you can drive for dozens of kilometers without seeing a single person. So why is it like that? Geography and climate. Both remote and harsh North Dakota is a state in the Midwest of the US, pretty much right in the middle of the North American continent. To the north, it borders Canada. To the west is Montana, the south is South Dakota, and to the east is Minnesota, with the Red River forming a natural boundary. An interesting fact is that the town of Rugby, which is in the state, is considered the geographic center of all of North America. There's even a stone monument there to mark the spot. But since it's pretty far from major cities like Chicago, New York, or Los Angeles, and not really on any main transportation routes, North Dakota doesn't attract a lot of people or workers. That's one of the reasons why the population density here is so low. In terms of terrain, North Dakota covers about 183,125 square kilometers and is divided into 3 main regions from east to west. To the east is the Red River Valley, a flat, fertile area that used to be the bottom of the ancient Lake Agassiz. This is the state's agricultural heartland, where they grow a lot of wheat, corn, and sugar beets. Moving toward the center, you get the Drift Prairie and the Missouri Plateau. The Drift Prairie has sediment-rich soil that's good for farming. The Missouri Plateau, on the other hand, is higher up, not as fertile, gets a lot of snow in the winter and often floods in spring when the snow melts. To the west is the Great Plains region. It's more rugged, with lots of hills and mountains, and it's rich in natural resources, especially oil and coal. Because of this kind of landscape, most of North Dakota is covered in grasslands and prairies. There aren't many trees naturally except in low-lying areas where there's water. Still, the soil is fairly fertile, which is great for farming. On top of that, North Dakota also has big reserves of lignite coal and oil and gas. That said, the wild environment can also be inconvenient. You might run into large animals like bison, moose, or wolves, and sometimes they cause traffic accidents. Insects like mosquitoes, assassin bugs, and some weird-looking spiders can also really bother people. When it comes to climate, North Dakota has a strong continental feel. Winters are seriously cold, with temperatures dropping as low as -51 degrees Celsius, and heavy snowstorms are common. Summers, on the other hand, can get really hot, sometimes close to 50 degrees Celsius in the western part of the state. There's not much rainfall overall, mostly rain in the summer and snow in the winter. Since it sits between humid and semi-arid zones and is affected by things like El Niño and La Niña, the weather can be super unpredictable. Droughts, tornadoes, hailstorms, ice storms, and spring floods all happen pretty often. On average, around 30 tornadoes sweep through the state every year. With such extreme weather and tough living conditions, it's no surprise that not many people choose North Dakota as a long-term home. Most of the population lives spread out in a few small towns or in farming areas where folks are used to dealing with this kind of climate. The population is sparse and getting older. As of 2024, North Dakota is one of the least populated states in the US, 4th from the bottom, with only around 796,000 people, and an average population density of just 4.35 people per square kilometer. Even though folks here are known for being friendly, daily social interaction can be pretty tough just because people live so far apart. In some places, your nearest neighbor might be a whole kilometer away, and getting to a shopping center could mean a 2-hour drive. Most of the state's population is concentrated in a few cities like Fargo, Bismarck, and Grand Forks. Fargo is the biggest one, with over 118,000 people, but even that's considered a small city by US standards. Outside of these urban areas, most of North Dakota is prairie land, with small towns and tiny communities. Some places have fewer than 100 residents left. Quite a few of these communities are at risk of disappearing completely. That's not just inconvenient for everyday life, It also creates a sense of isolation and makes it harder to attract new people to settle down here. The main reason goes back to the state's uneven population growth over time. Before 1889, when North Dakota officially became a state, the land belonged to Native American tribes like the Sioux, Mandan, and Hidatsa. Then came the Homestead Act of 1862, which encouraged Europeans to settle by offering free land. Still, the harsh climate and isolated terrain meant not everyone could stick it out. By the late 19th century, a wave of immigrants from Europe, especially Germans and Scandinavians, caused a population boom. The numbers jumped from just a few thousand to nearly 680,000 by 1930. But starting in the mid-20th century, as farming became more mechanized, the demand for labor dropped. That led to a wave of young people moving away in search of better opportunities. By 1970, the population had fallen to around 617,000. In the early 2000s, North Dakota became a rising energy hub thanks to shale oil drilling, which brought in a lot of workers. But most of them were temporary, and when oil prices crashed in 2014, many packed up and left. Lately, though, North Dakota's population has started to diversify thanks to a new wave of international immigration. People from countries like Congo, Syria, and Afghanistan have chosen to settle here. In 2024, the state's population grew by more than 7,500, mostly due to immigration and natural growth, more births than deaths. That said, North Dakota is still facing a big challenge: an aging population. Since 2011, the baby boomer generation has been hitting retirement age, and by 2030, that whole group will be between 65 and 84 years old. At the same time, the number of people in the workforce and the number of children are both expected to go down. If the forecasts are right, by 2030, the over 65 group will grow by 56%, while the labor force could shrink by 18%. On top of that, housing is another major hurdle. Home prices are going up, the market is small, and people's incomes aren't exactly high. More than half the homes for sale are priced at $300,000 or more, which makes things tough for new households, especially first-time buyers. A lot of folks are spending over 30% of their income just on rent or mortgage payments. All in all, even though North Dakota has growth potential and is seeing some positive changes, the low population density, fast aging population, and housing challenges are still major obstacles when it comes to attracting and keeping long-term residents. An economy that's too dependent and not many exciting jobs. As of now, North Dakota's GDP is around $75.4 billion, and the average income per person is $94,655, actually higher than the national average. Unemployment is also really low, sitting at just about 2.1%. But even with those numbers, the state still isn't attracting many newcomers or immigrants. The main reason is that the economy isn't very diverse, and the average salary here is almost $8,000 lower than the national average, $52,230 compared to $62,027. Right now, agriculture is still the mainstay, covering about 90% of the land. That's nearly 233,000 square kilometers. Out of that, 97,000 square kilometers are farmland, mostly growing wheat, with an average production of over 8 million tons a year. But because a lot of automation technology is used, only a small number of people work directly in farming, less than 10% of the population. Energy is also a big contributor, bringing in more than $13 billion in 2024. North Dakota produces about 1.2 million barrels of oil a day. Plus, wind energy made up 37% of the total electricity generated in 2023, ranking 4th in the country. But these industries don't really create long-term jobs because they depend a lot on the global market. Meanwhile, sectors that usually attract young people, like tech, healthcare, and finance, barely exist here except for a few small companies in Fargo. That's why many students leave the state after graduation to find better opportunities elsewhere. In short, even though North Dakota has potential in agriculture and energy, the lack of industry diversity few high-quality jobs, and uneven wages are still big barriers that make it hard for the state to keep workers and young families. Cultural life, pretty dull and not very diverse. Right now, white people make up over 81% of North Dakota's population. The rest are Native Americans, Latinos, Black people, Asians, and other ethnic groups, but their numbers are pretty small, so this is one of the least racially diverse states in the U.S. That's part of why North Dakota isn't very appealing to young people or anyone coming from different cultural backgrounds. Since most folks here have Northern European roots and live in a pretty traditional way, newcomers, especially people of color or from the LGBTQ+ community, might find it hard to fit in, feel unwelcome, and barely see any cultural diversity in everyday life, from food to arts, festivals, or entertainment. Entertainment here mostly means ice fishing, seasonal fairs, skiing, or hunting, activities that don't always click with most modern young people. Life in general is quite monotonous, and North Dakota was even ranked the second most boring state in the country. This closed-off vibe also leads to problems like alcohol abuse and an increase in traffic accidents related to substance use. On top of that, healthcare is a big issue. Over 90% of the counties in the state are listed as lacking enough doctors and medical specialists, so people often have to drive an hour just to see a doctor. Not to mention, North Dakota is pretty conservative, with a lot of controversial policies. In 2023, the state passed laws limiting LGBTQ+ rights, which made many people feel unwelcome. Weak transportation infrastructure, hard to connect. Even though North Dakota has a pretty wide road network that links many rural and urban areas, the quality of the infrastructure is a big problem. It makes daily life harder and also holds back the state's ability to attract new residents. The main roads run mostly east-west with Fargo as a key hub, but north-south connections are weak, making travel between regions inefficient. Railroads used to be a strength, but from the 1970s and 80s, when the state loosened regulations, many smaller lines were removed, especially those serving agriculture. On top of that, nearly 50% of locally managed roads are in poor condition, and 10% of bridges are structurally weak. With the harsh climate, heavy snow, freezing, and thawing cycles, many roads get damaged quickly. This forces trucks to reduce loads by season, increasing logistics costs and cutting economic efficiency. On average, each person spends over $400 a year on car repairs and fuel because of bad roads. In cities like Bismarck, traffic jams cost each person more than $300 a year in extra time and travel expenses. As for air travel, even though there are some big airports, passengers often have to connect through Minnesota or Colorado because the population is too small to support direct flights. In short, weak transportation infrastructure and lack of investment are major barriers for North Dakota, not only affecting people's daily lives but also limiting economic growth and the ability to attract new residents. Small population, serious labor shortage. North Dakota's really small population is causing a serious labor shortage. This isn't just happening here, it's a problem all over the US. But North Dakota feels it more because the population is low and aging fast, while a lot of young people leave to find opportunities elsewhere. Right now, there are about 26,000 jobs waiting to be filled, but only around 7,900 people unemployed. So you can see there's a big gap between the number of jobs and the workers available. On top of that, the state's economy depends a lot on agriculture and energy, and these industries need workers to work in pretty tough conditions, especially during winter. In farming, because it's hard to find enough people, some smaller farms have to use automation, but that only really works for big farms because it's expensive. The energy sector is hit by market ups and downs. So many workers who came here before have left, leaving a big hole. Fields like healthcare and education are also badly affected, especially in rural areas where a lack of staff leads to poor services, long waits, and sometimes even closures. Even though North Dakota has lots of land, clean environment, and low living costs, good for farming and resource extraction. The sparse population makes it hard to develop industry, public services, and keep young workers around. Without much incentive for growth, healthcare, education, and transportation services in rural areas are limited, which just makes it harder to attract and keep people living there. In short, North Dakota is a beautiful place, rich in resources, but it's too peaceful to the point of being forgotten. Harsh weather, few suitable jobs, lack of services, a sparse population, dull culture, and limited transportation. All these things make it a place where few people want to live long term. If things are going to change, North Dakota probably needs to invest more in infrastructure, services, economic diversity, and clear settlement policies, so it doesn't keep getting left behind in America's modern development race.